Welcome back to another episode of the Dyslexic Maverick. I'm so excited to have a true expert in ADHD and dive into the areas of nutrition and health as it relates to ADHD today with Seth Rodman. Seth, thank you for being here.
I'm so excited to be here with you.
One question I always ask people as we're getting started is, do you have multiple drinks around you, around your desk?
I feel attacked now.
Is that a
Yes, I
yes?
do. I've got 2 water bottles and a cup of tea.
Awesome, awesome. I also have for those on YouTube, you can see, but I've got, like, multiple tea, coffee, and water. No shortage of drinks between the 2 of us, right? I have yet to have a guest that didn't have at least 2 drinks, on the show yet.
It No, it is a requirement to be a drink goblin. Beverage goblin, yeah.
I was actually walking up the stairs to my office this morning, and I had 3, and they were 2 of them were hot, so I was, like, trying to balance as I'm walking up the stairs, and somebody else was like, "Can I help you? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is every day for me." Like, of course, but
Yeah.
they don't see it every day.
No, you need one for hydration, one for caffeine, and one for flavor.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I feel at home when you say that because 'cause I'm like, "Yes, absolutely," but it's a little known fact among neurotypicals, I think, so.
I think so, yeah.
Well, good. Well, I should give you a more formal introduction, Seth. So you are an RN and a board certified nurse coach, which means you're a nurse and a certified coach, which is so awesome. We're going to dig into that more.
Mhm.
Seth is also certified in as a clinical service provider for ADHD. He works with professionals who have new or recently diagnosed ADHD symptoms or ADHD-like symptoms that negatively impact their lives. And Seth knows what it's like to struggle with ADHD. He has known firsthand through his life what the right resources and support can do to make all the difference in your life, and through his own struggles and experiences. So he's actually developed some new processes, and we'll kind of dig into those today too, on how to holistically manage your ADHD, which I think is so important. And so I'm so excited to have you here. One of the questions I get asked a lot, Seth, is about medication, right? And I
Sure.
think medication certainly has its route. And just as a disclaimer, I always say that people should consider that as an option because I do think for so many of us, it is life changing and does help, especially as we're learning the skills and techniques to cope with our life and our different brain. But I always encourage people, especially with children, to look at all options, right, and look at that holistic approach. So, one of the many reasons I'm glad that you're here today, that we can kind of dig into those different approaches. Um, and one thing that I love, I saw is that you have an actual like a meal plan, or you kind of created a mini guide for ADHDers.
I did. I created a nutrition guide, and that started because from the I mean, I know we're gonna dig into it more, but from the workbook that I created to help create the foundational skills for ADHD, one of the sections is based around nutrition and meal planning, and I had originally left it a little more open to try and encourage people to go down the rabbit hole a little bit more on their own, trying to, like, use that ADHD strength of curiosity, and, well, that backfired a little bit. So I thought that I'd left enough breadcrumbs there, but I think that I actually frustrated people a little too much. I didn't lead them down the path quite enough. And so I went the next step, and I've created a full explanation nutrition guide, uh dove into explanation of the neurotransmitters, how this is a mind body connection, the foods, and also included some recipes as well.
Awesome, awesome. I absolutely love that. I think so many people, we hear about ADHD a lot as like a almost just an excuse, or people hear it as an excuse. And when we can give the science behind the neurotransmitters and the different dopamine and serotonin levels and the actual science behind it, it takes that kind of excuse piece off the table and shows people, no, this is real life. We have science to prove.
It Absolutely. I mean, this is why I love coming at it from the nursing side of it, because I'm coming at it from that science-backed side, from that evidence-based perspective. So that's what I'm bringing, not just coaching, not just, well, here's what I think is going to work, but this is bringing the evidence, the science, the research, but bringing it forward in a way that is in the coaching realm and is actually digestible and understandable and useful. But then it's also, I completely lost my train of thought. uh, but yeah, it's, oh, I remember where I was going with that. It's, I do think that it's the other piece of it too there though, is that exactly what you said with people viewing ADHD as an excuse, especially with more people being diagnosed, instead of it being recognized as people are getting diagnosed because there's better understanding, they hear the name, right? It's like, oh, it's attention deficit disorder, or they see, or now that everything's lumped together with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it's like, eh. And they look at especially anyone who's an adult. They're like, well, you're not hyperactive. It's the rare person who's reaches adulthood and they're hyperactive, right? Like that sucks, because then it's like, well, you're just making an excuse. You don't actually have this. Well, hyperactivity doesn't follow you through adulthood. That does usually change, but it's a misnomer. It's a badly named disorder. Like,
It's terrible, it's terrible, and hyperactivity, I think, looks different for adults than it does for kids, right? Like,
mhm,
I work with so many people that are like, "I'm just mentally hyperactive instead of physically hyperactive,"
yeah,
and it's just like, it's terrible to watch, honestly, because people are self-destructing inside, but they look like they have it all together.
exactly. And I mean, a big part of it is because as you grow up, you learn coping skills, or masking skills at least. So you learn how to hide it. You learn how to make other people feel more comfortable around you. And that's so much of what it is, right? And it does become self-destructive, but how many of us go out to a restaurant, sit at the table and tear apart the napkin or tear apart the straw wrapper? Like I've got stim toys like all over my desk because I have to be doing something. I know that for myself, a lot of times if I'm feeling that kind of jitteriness, I refocus it into like kind of rubbing my toes against each other so that other people don't see me bouncing up and down, but I'm still, that energy is still there.
Absolutely. I was just saying that at a speaking engagement the other day. I said, we go from like the kid that maybe is chatty in school or picking on kids in line or whatever that is, to in an office we're tapping our toes or squishing our toes or kind of doing different playing with our hair, different things that look more quote unquote normal, right? Like you're not
Mhm.
going to distract, or you might not even see people stimming and masking those behaviors, but it doesn't mean that they're not doing it, and if they're not doing it, it's almost worse because at least the people, kind of like squishing their toes together or tapping their foot, they're getting it out. Um, but
Right.
but if you're bottling it in, that can be even more destructive.
It is. And if you're, I mean, think about that. If you're in a setting in the office where you feel like you have to push that down so much that it is internally destructive at work, what are you doing at home? What also, what are those internal conversations that you're having with yourself? What are you saying to yourself that is so harmful and so negative? I mean, I know that in my practice, there are two words that come up all the time, and across the board, I try to make these never words because they are probably the two most destructive words for anyone who is neurodivergent. That's just and should.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I like to say you should never should yourself, right? I think another guest actually on my podcast said that at one point, and I loved it.
It it's true. It's absolutely true. But if you think back, those are the two words that everyone else has said to us through our whole lives, that then we internalized it. And that's when it became really destructive. That's where the masking came from. That's where the negative self-talk came from. When you start to eliminate that, then you can have those real conversations with yourself. That's when you can start moving forward. The only time that I feel like it's okay to use just is if you're talking about time and space. Like, I'm gonna be just outside that door.
That's awesome. So what would you recommend for somebody who is maybe listening to this and then like a week from now they're like, I say should or I say just a lot. And I even catch myself writing it in emails. And thankfully Grammarly kind of kicks it back to me and underlines it. It's like, do you need that word in there? But do you have any tips or tricks of when you're helping clients through that?
It is a big mindset shift. And part of that mindset shift is creating that mentality of these are never words. It's thinking of it almost like swearing. And not that, you know, any of us don't swear at home. If you're in I mean, if you're in the office, you're not gonna curse like a sailor unless you are someone like me who is a nurse, and then you just keep it in the nurse's station because, yeah, nurses nurses speak in a way that would make most people blush. That's how we survive, but not something that makes HR happy when they come around. But it's also something that lets us get through, right? But you know when to shut it off. It's the same thing. You don't put it in emails. You don't say it to higher ups. You don't say it to people that you care about. And if you wouldn't say it to people that you care about, think about why are you saying it to yourself? And so it's about making that shift, making it those never words, making it that thought process that this really is a negative word to remove from the vocabulary, and letting yourself have that fuller conversation, that fuller explanation. Because really the point of just and should is to close the door on the conversation.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that. So you seem very self-aware. Can we maybe back up a little bit and talk about how did you figure out you had a differently wired brain and maybe take us through kind of high level your story?
Absolutely. I was one of the lucky ones in the early 90s. I had very supportive parents who are actually both psychologists, but not the kind of psychologists who bring their work home with them in the way that they worked to diagnose or treat me clinically themselves. So they saw where I was struggling. They saw the behaviors. They saw the fact that even in elementary school, when we had the pocket desks, that I was just shoving stuff in there, couldn't keep it organized. And I was already losing homework in elementary school in my own desk. And that didn't get better as it went. Then I was the kid that lost my own homework in my own backpack. So in the early 90s, my parents saw these traits, and thankfully they were in a realm where they could kind of recognize what was going on. They got me diagnosed. They very early started intervening. And so I had this support system. I had this work going on. And the supports that were available, especially in public school in the 90s, weren't great. Like there wasn't a whole lot available. Like, I was able to have a note taker. I was able to have a word. My handwriting was horrible because I have dysgraphia also, along with, because no one ever has just ADHD. It's always the fun grab bag of other neurodiversity with it, right? So I've got that. I've got, you know, whole fun mix of other things. The dysgraphia was a big problem because I couldn't even read my own handwriting. So I had a word processor, which was basically the size of a typewriter with a keyboard, and then a screen that was about 1 inch by 3 inches. So I could type on it to try and take notes in class. And this is like elementary and middle school. And then I had to plug it into the classroom computer and save my work to a floppy disk.
Some
But
of
that
us will remember floppy disks.
Oh my god. I know. The little save icon. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's what I had early on. Eventually, the public school system failed me. They said, "We don't know what to do with you. We cannot help you." And thankfully, because of the way the laws are structured, that meant I got to go someplace that could. And the public school system had to pay for me to go there, which is why I could afford to do that. So I ended up in a private school that was a college prep school for kids with learning disabilities. So that's where I was for high school, and it was a computer based school. They had smart boards. It was digital note taking, and because it was a school for kids with learning disabilities, the curriculum was built around learning your strengths, learning your weaknesses, building skills around all of that. And because I was a teenager, I really didn't care, but it was still getting integrated anyway. Once I was out of high school and that safety net was gone, suddenly I was like, oh, this is what I learned. This is why it's important. I initially crashed and burned in college, but I still went back. I was like, this is important to me. I'm going to do it, especially in nursing school. And through nursing, that's when I really started pulling in all of this work. I was like, I need these skills. This is what I need to do to survive. Through all of this, I was also a martial artist. So I had this background that was grounding me. I was taught how to meditate. I became a meditation instructor through that. So I had the grounding, I had the focus, I had the routine as well. I've been a martial artist ever since I was 14 years old up through today now with that. So combining those mental health skills with the martial arts training, bringing that through, and then bringing in that clinical practice and the clinical research, that's really what brought it all together. And then the need to get away from the bedside, from not not being able to serve people the way that I felt was appropriate anymore, especially after working through the pandemic. That's really what brought me to where I am today. And bringing all of that experience together is what let me shape the ADHD program to bring my, you know, over 3 decades of experience and learning curve and successes and failures into this program to really help people cut this learning curve down and have the skills and tools to succeed and thrive within a few months.
So I'm curious. This is something that's actually come up a little bit more often. Is the martial arts as like a form of discipline to well, one the discipline part, but two just the confidence and the just all of the other benefits that come with it. Is there like a certain type of martial arts that you did, or is there a certain one that you think would be great for ADHDers? Especially, I'm thinking of like a 10-year-old boy who's got ADHD and maybe doesn't have all the confidence in the world, but and isn't maybe a sports kid.
I mean, honestly, any martial art is a great one to start with because they all build those foundational skills. They create that structure. And as you grow and learn these skills, it builds that confidence and it builds that resilience. It builds that warrior spirit. I started in Taekwondo and became a fourth degree black belt in that. I eventually moved into Kung Fu, and now I train in Filipino martial arts. There is no good, better, best. The key is just consistency.
Interesting. No, that's great. I think sometimes we push kids into, soccer or football or all those different ones, and those are great, right? If that's what the children like and, it kind of scratches the itch, then we're good, but there's so many other options out there than those traditional options too. And I think a lot of our kids especially, they thrive in individual environments, sometimes too, just because they've been in school all day and they're kind of socialized out for a lot of us, and so giving them that kind of a more of an individualized activity.
That's such a huge part of it. I think the other thing that doesn't get talked about enough with martial arts is that, there's the exercise aspect of it, there's the social aspect of it, and there's the fun of it, which are all fantastic and they all benefit ADHD also. But when you're doing forms, That's a form of meditation, and that gets missed. Because everyone thinks of meditation, you're like, you're either laying down or you're sitting, and that's meditation, right? Forms are moving meditation. Once you're not thinking about the movements because you've learned them, and you can actually go and you're just concentrating on going through and being better, and you're clearing your head of all the other distractions, that's meditation. That's moving meditation. And that has so much clinical evidence tied to improvements with ADHD and self-regulation and emotional regulation. So there are direct links here that don't get talked about but are really important.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I'm picturing for somebody that maybe doesn't, I'm kind of transitioning to like, somebody more like myself who maybe martial arts isn't their thing, but even like a yoga or tai chi or something that has those kind of repetition.
It's the same thing. Yoga is moving meditation. Tai chi is slow kung fu.
I like that. That's
Yeah,
probably
I
more
mean
my speed.
the truth is that Tai Chi is actually a martial art. The difference is that they teach the combat last after like 10 years. It's just the order that they teach things in.
I love that, and I love thinking about it differently, right? Like, yes, it's exercise, yes, it's self-confidence, but that meditation piece is something that I certainly hadn't thought of, and so, that's a wonderful takeaway, I think, for our listeners as well.
Again, once you move outside those boxes, once you're out, everyone wants to put things in boxes where it's like this is a sport, this is no boxes. No box take away the boxes for people, for these categories. Once you take away those preconceptions, it opens up all of these different pathways.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing your story. I think it's important, to hear because everyone's journey is different. It's interesting for people to get diagnosed early and diagnosed late, and I don't think honestly, I don't even know if one's better than the other. It's just everybody's story is a little bit different. I do think the one common thread I see is, one or two people really advocating and believing in somebody makes all the difference in the world. And with your parents, I think those that would be at least a part of your
My
success.
parents, it was the teachers that I had at my high school, and honestly, it was my first martial arts instructor. He kept me on the straight and narrow, and he believed in me like no other. He pushed me to be the best version of myself, and especially when I was a teenager, I mean, I know that I gave the high level, but especially then with ADHD and hormones, I mean, I dealt with a lot of depression even then, and that was hard to get through. But having that consistency, having someone who believed in me, having someone who pushed me, that meant everything. And there were points where even where I was almost at rock bottom, that's what kept me from hitting that absolute base. So that's what helped me pull through, is having that system of support. It doesn't help with everything, being a competitive athlete through all of that, having that depression, like there were issues with body dysmorphia, there were issues around food that it was only recently I've kind of been able to really work on and resolve. But these are all parts of it, and these are the things that I really work very hard to help other people with too.
I think it's just so important that we share our stories, right? Because I think we all think that we're alone in this and that we're the only ones struggling, and it's absolutely not the case, but until you see those eyes light up of like, "Wait, you've gone through that too?" Which I know you have with your clients and I have too, and it's like, "No, you're not alone." Like, you're actually in really good company. There's a lot of really amazing people that have felt that same way.
It makes all the difference, right? It's breaking that sense of isolation and building that community and building that realization that there is a community. That is such a big part of what lets people move forward.
Yeah, I wish everyone would shout it from the rooftops because as soon as you bring it up, even in a conversation just socially, there's always other people that will then say, "Oh, yeah, I have ADHD too," or "My spouse does," or whatever, and it's like, "Oh, if we just start talking about it as not a deficit, but just a trait of ours, I think it can go very positively.
It really can, and I think that it really makes all the difference when people feel seen. Actually, before we were recording this, about at just a couple hours ago, I was on a call with someone, and it was just a casual networking call. But he had also looked at my profile on the site that we were on a little bit before, and he's like, "Oh, wait, like he specialized in ADHD." And this is someone who was a VP of wealth management at his company. And then he opened up to me. He's like, "Yeah, I really think that like I'm have ADHD and I've been undiagnosed all this time, and I'm really interested in what you're doing because this really opens up all these different questions and opportunities for me." He's like, "I've been okay, but this also makes me realize that there are other paths where I don't have to be this way."
Yeah. No, that's such an excellent point. I had a similar call actually today, and I doubt we were talking to the same person. I think that
I
there's a
think
lot
so.
of them out there. But yeah, there and I think it's a really good point though that a lot of our probably both of our coaching clients, I know for me, attorneys and business owners, like there are very, very successful people that they're doing okay, right? Like it's not like they're coming to us and their lives are
Mhm.
literally in shambles, although that can be the case for some, but usually it's not. It's the look, I'm surviving, but I know it shouldn't be this hard. And can you help me get to where I need to go faster? Right? Like let's just take off the training wheels and go together. And I think that that's what coaching does for so many people. And it's there's an ego part of it, right? Especially if you're a successful business owner or a VP. There can be that piece of kind of insecurity, and we already have
Oh
those,
yeah,
right? I mean, we're living with not fitting in the box to begin with, so that's kind of innate. But, yeah, I think that's a great call out, is it we're helping people get better, right? Like, you don't have to be at rock bottom, to ask for help. Actually, it's much easier for us to help you,
absolutely.
right? If the good to great.
And I mean, really, that nails it, doesn't it? Is that it's all about that willingness to ask for help, because asking for help doesn't mean that you're failing. Asking for help means that you just want to improve. I mean, especially when I think talking about especially executives and like folks who are on on that higher functioning level, is not that not that everyone should be an executive, because god, that would be awful for everyone. um Not everyone can be at the top of the pyramid, and not everyone should be, like, and that's not everyone's goal. Everyone should be exactly where they're happy and comfortable. That said, though, when you look at executives, these people who are high functioning, who were able to do their thing in their field well, that doesn't mean that every piece of what they do goes smoothly, and that they're not struggling on the inside, that they're not dealing with their own invisible battles. And that also doesn't mean that just because they are a rock star at work with their area of hyper focus, the thing that they love, that when you go to their house, it's not full of doom piles, and that it doesn't drive them insane also when they get home. Like, being great in one area doesn't mean that you're not struggling somewhere else, and that you don't want to improve it, or that it's not impacting your relationships. Like, these are all different. Your success in one area doesn't dictate your entire life. It means that you're successful in that area, but you are not just one area of your life.
Exactly. I hear a lot from leaders. I'm managing my ADHD, but I think I'm driving my teams crazy. And I resonate so deeply with that because I just look back at the teams I led and how frustrated those people probably were on a daily basis of, my hallway conversations of like, "Hey, I have this idea and blah blah blah." And then I'd keep walking and I was like leaving this path of destruction behind me of like all these people running and doing different things that I suggested literally, I was
Mhm.
just brainstorming, right? Like, I mean, that's how my brain works. I am full of ideas, very challenged when it comes to the full execution of the entire project, right? And so I'm always brainstorming out loud. I'm a verbal processor on top of it, so that just, like,
Yeah.
adds fuel to the fire, right? Because yeah, I'm just talking all the time, and people are thinking that they're action items, and I'm the leader, so they think I'm giving them, things to do, and then I wonder why they're so busy when I didn't even like, they don't even have a new project, and they're like, "No, I have 14 that you told me yesterday," and I'm like, "Oh gosh, that was just something I thought about, but I didn't mean for you to execute on any of those." And so there's this communication thing. So with ADHD leaders, it can be really challenging to be on their teams too.
It can. And I think this is one of the big I think communication is one of the big keys is there needs to be that level of self-realization. It like you have yours there of this is what I did, this is how it impacted people. If someone can come to you or me and say, "I think I'm leaving a path of destruction behind me and make driving my team insane," if you can say that to us, you can change your behavior and it doesn't have to be dramatic. Like, let your team question you. Like, it you just yeah, empower other people. Let them be like, "Is this an action item or are you just talking?" Like, let people clarify, and that it can be that simple.
That's exactly that, and that's yeah, that's exactly what I did, right? Like, once I figured out that, like, "Oh my gosh, I'm creating this chaos," which again, ADHD trait of ours, right? If there's not enough chaos in the room, we'll just create some extra just for fun. Um, so I sat down my team and I said, "Hey, look, here's the thing. I like to bring things through out loud. In no way are these action items unless I actually say they are. And if we're ever unclear, you have full authority to ask and say, "Hey, here's what I think I should work on next," and then we can clarify. And that was a game changer, right? Like it wasn't a huge thing. It wasn't even the way I really changed my leadership style. It was just empowering them to ask a question, and it helped both of us. And it kinda made me realize, like, "Oh my gosh, I really did, like, spitball 13 ideas in 45 seconds." Like, how did like, if that was an Olympic sport, I would definitely have a gold medal.
I mean, that it's taking that different role of leadership, right? And it's recognizing that leadership doesn't only come from one person, which is such a revelation for so many people, especially I think for a lot of folks in leadership who learned how to lead while climbing the ladder instead of being taught how to be a leader first. Because I mean,
Yeah, which almost never happens, right? Like, most of the time, it's somebody who's good at their job who becomes a manager or a leader, but they weren't given the formal training, right? So they're figuring it out.
when do most people get leadership training? After they reach a higher level and after something becomes problematic. That's not the time to train someone. It can't be if you want people to succeed, it can't be reactive. And I mean, and honestly, that's where the things that you and I do come in. Like, we can't make people change, but I mean, honestly, that is like especially that's what I try and do, especially if I'm coming into an organization is, proactive change, not reactive change. I know that you and I come at it from slightly different angles. It still ends up at the same point, but also a lot of my training come in leadership training comes from the National Outdoor Leadership School.
Yeah, will you talk to us more about that? Because I know you have, like, a backpacking trip coming up, right, in 2025, that I saw, so I would love to hear more about that.
So I originally between college and high school, I did a full semester with the National Outdoor Leadership School in the Southwest. And that was entirely focused not only on training how to train others how to do everything that I was doing out there with backpacking, rock climbing, caving, all sorts of fun stuff, but it's focused on
Wait, caving? Caving is
Yeah,
caving
also
a
called
thing?
spelunking.
Wait, oh my gosh. So the dyslexic in this conversation will
It's
never
okay.
spell that
But
correctly, but,
yeah,
uh
going into dangerous holes in the ground to look at cool stuff.
okay, okay. That's called
Caving. It
splunking?
is caving. Yeah.
Caving, okay, okay.
Um, no, no,
Awesome, alright,
no,
I
it's
didn't mean to detour too much, but I
all
had to
good,
call out
and,
those yeah.
also, whitewater canoeing on the Rio Grande, so really, really cool semester. But you're out there with other people, it's not like you're by yourself, so this is team building, leadership training. It is focused on how do you train other people to work with you together. How do you lead from the front? How do you also lead when you are not the designated leader? Because sometimes you have to challenge people's thinking. And when you are out in the wilderness, the need to work together and to do so effectively, it's even more critical than when you're doing it as a team at your organization. If you if you don't work together effectively at work, you might miss a deadline. You might cost the company money. And that can suck, but that can be made up. If you don't work together effectively as a team out in the wilderness, someone's going to get hurt. Someone could die. You might run out of food. You might not get to your water source. Like this becomes life or death leadership training. It is it's leadership training under fire, but in a very fun and friendly environment. um,
Was it relatively safe? I'm picturing, like, some safety guardrails.
it's safe as far as you're not taking unnecessary risks, but it's as safe as nature can be.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's yeah. You can't always protect against bears coming or
No, I
animals
mean,
attacking or yeah.
nature is going to do what nature is going to do. There are inherent risks, especially with the semester, because you're doing so many different things. The backpacking trip that I have planned is more tame. There's no ropes involved, there's no climbing, there's no whitewater involved. This is leadership training and backpacking through the southern Utah canyons. We'll start out of Salt Lake City, um, go into the canyon areas south of Salt Lake City. It's a 7-day course that focuses on not only leadership training from that will be led by NOLS instructors, so instructors from the National Outdoor Leadership School, that they'll be the ones leading the backpacking, all of the camp setup, teaching how to cook in the backcountry, but also one-on-one coaching with me focused on ADHD management for personal management, but also for leaders who have neurodiverse teams, how to really best lead those teams and engage them in a way to get the most out of them and really raise people up.
So I can't even cook in my own kitchen. I can't even imagine.
There's something actually easier about it when you only have one little camp burner and one pan, and you have to do everything in that pan or pot.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. The joke in my house is, like, I can make one thing and it's applesauce. I can make homemade applesauce really well, and that's it. Not even, like, mac and cheese or toast or anything else, like, that is the one and only thing. Um, but too funny. Well, no, that's awesome. I love that. I love that there's an obviously the very obvious nature component of it, but I think that sometimes that gets overlooked too of just how important it is for us to get out in the air and get away from Wi-Fi signals and get away from not only our phones, but just everything in our environment is
And I mean,
so, so important.
that's a huge part of why I wanted to partner with Knowles to create this trip, is it gets people away from everything. It's not in a conference center where you're going to be looking at your phone, you're going to be looking at your tablet. You are disconnected from all of the distractions. It lets your brain reset, and it lets you be out in green space, which is shown to help with ADHD. It's shown to help increase dopamine production. So not only are you getting this leadership training, not only are you learning all these skill sets, but you're also, just by being there, helping your brain reset and improve.
There's times where I'm like, I just need to get outside, and I'm actually a big fan of grounding. Just I don't know, for people that haven't heard of it, it's literally just taking off your shoes and socks and
Mhm.
putting your feet on the ground, which seems so incredibly simple, and yet none of us hardly ever do it. It's just it's well, maybe you do, but it takes, like, effort for me to plan, like, when am I actually gonna go outside and take off my shoes and socks and, like, stand in the grass and just be for 5 minutes.
I regularly just go outside and sit on the lawn with the dogs and just be. I've got a serenity bell set up in my backyard, so it's just this nice deep gong.
Of course you do. Of course you have a serenity bell in your backyard. I knew who
It's
I was talking
my
to, of
favorite
course
wind
you do.
chime.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think sometimes we overcomplicate how we can help ourselves, and literally it's going out and sitting in the grass and playing with their dogs, right? Like, that brings so much joy on so many different levels, or just watching birds fly around your yard, or, listening to all like, trying to count how many sounds you can listen to, or
I mean, honestly, you just touched on one of my favorite techniques that I get people started with, and that's just mindful listening.
yeah, so walk us
Absolutely.
through that, can you?
It's it's so simple. It's just going at I you don't have to go outside, but I always encourage outside because it's outside. Sitting down, being comfortable, and listening. Listening without judgment, taking it in, and being aware of everything you hear. Turning off the filter. Don't filter anything out, don't turn anything off. Every insect buzz, every car that drives by, every bird, take it in, be aware of it, assess it, no judgment. Don't chase any thoughts down any rabbit holes. Just keep letting it wash over you. Just be aware, and always without judgment. No judgment about, even if you hear those angry squirrel sounds, let those sounds come in, but keep that judgment off of, like, oh, that's an angry squirrel. Just squirrel. I'm aware we're talking about ADHD and I brought up squirrels, but keep the angry part out. Just sounds. Just take in all of the sounds. And that's just one of 5 mindfulness techniques that I get people started with. But it's one of the easiest, because you just have to be.
Yeah, I love that, I love that. Um, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and we go in spurts where we are more into the meditation side, and then life gets busy, and then we are like, "Hey, we need to recenter in that." Um, and I was doing this outside over the summer, and the judgment piece, like, some cars would drive by the house, and I would hear them, and it wouldn't bother me, and then other ones that had, like, a noisy muffler or something like that, like, I would start to judge, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm consistently making things good or bad, and it's not. It just is,
I
right?"
mean, that's the whole practice of mindfulness, is keeping that morality out of it, right? It's it's tough. And that's why it's a practice. And I try and make it really clear to people, because so many people are really, they really try and put the brakes on when you bring up mindfulness. It's like, I can't meditate. I'm like, it's not meditation. Mindfulness is the practice. Meditation is the exercise. They are similar, but they're different. Mindfulness is a practice. It can have daily application, because you can listen mindfully. You can eat mindfully. You can look mindfully. There are there are others. But these are all different ways that you can be mindful. And mindfulness is intention, awareness, and lack of judgment.
Wait, say that again, just so we get that in our brain.
Mindfulness is awareness, intention, and lack of judgment. If you can hold on to those three, you're being mindful. When you start adding in clearing your thoughts or bringing yourself into a single intention, now you're making it an exercise. Now it's meditation because now it's harder. Now it's working towards something. And especially let's use mindfulness meditation because we're on that one. If you're staying aware of your breathing and you're doing mindful breathing meditation, you're trying to get your mind to clear, which means letting your thoughts go and trying to reach that blank state. Well, the meditation's not the blank state. The exercise is that every time those thoughts come back, you're able to bring yourself back down. It's like going to the gym. The exercise isn't putting the dumbbell down. It's doing the curl. So bringing yourself back down is like doing a curl. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Yeah. Oh, that part is 100%. It's amazing when I stop doing it regularly and then I start up again, and I'm not nearly as skilled as I at least as I remember I was when I was doing it really
Mhm.
as a practice, right? Like, the word practice is intentional, I'm sure, that it's always an evolving practice, and you're never there, right? It's
Exactly.
always going. Um, you mentioned something about
Yeah.
eating, and I would love to go into more nutrition a little bit too, because this is always one of my hyper focuses. I think what we put in our bodies is so darn important for every single person, but for ADHDers, it is. I think it's one of the most underestimated
I
pieces.
absolutely agree with that.
What are some key things that you work on with your clients as far as, like, are there is there, like, a top 3 or top 5 that you kind of look for when you're talking about nutrition?
Number 1 is meal planning. Just just to
Okay.
get over the hump of ordering out, making sure that there is the food that you want to eat, will eat, and is available, and also so that there isn't impulsive spending going on at the same time. Now it's not just mind body connection. Now there's also impulsive spending tied in also when you're ordering out all the time. And this is where, I mean, it all ties together, right? It's never just one area. Diet and nutrition isn't just diet and nutrition. It also ties into health and wellness. It ties into finances. It all of these different areas blend together. Really, that big hurdle is cooking, because when you are having to cook every day, I love cooking. I love cooking. I hate having to cook every day. Having to figure out what am I going to make? How am I going to make it? Do I have the ingredients? Do I have to go shopping? It's awful. That is the most overwhelming feeling, especially with trying to balance everything else that I have to do. So batch meals are your best friend. That's really where I try and start, because if you can find those meals that you consistently like, that you can spend 1 day a week making a bunch of it, having the portions that you like, and then freezing some of it, now not only do you have food for the week, but you have food that you can go back to, like, oh, I didn't want this. I want this portion of something else. And you can just pull it out of the freezer. Once you get into that habit and you're only sacrificing 1 day a week, it's not even sacrificing. You are putting in one day a week to feed yourself and feed yourself with the food that you want. It's That's able to move into the nutritional side of it. No one's going to make dietary changes around things that they don't want or that they can't eat or they don't want to eat. So once cooking is actually in place, once batch meals are in place, then we can move into the actual nutrition of it. And that's where it gets into focusing on things like tyrosine and L-theanine, iron, magnesium. These are big players, which seem silly as far as it seems straightforward, right? Like, well, I mean, maybe not tyrosine and L-theanine, but like it's like, well, of course you need magnesium and iron. Like that's just food. But
Right.
these are things that easily get overlooked. And now that's where it moves into where can you get the nutrients that you need, and how do you get those, and how do you create that diet around that meal planning? And most people are not familiar with tyrosine and L-theanine.
Yeah. I know them, but I can't tell you what foods have them.
So I'm going to take it back just a step before we jump into the food, just so like listeners can aren't there like, what the heck are they talking about with this stuff?
Right. Before
Right.
you go on to another podcast, just hear us out.
Tyrosine and theanine are amino acids. Our bodies need them, our brains need them. Both of them are dopamine precursors, which means that we eat them, we go in, our body breaks them down, and these are the amino acids that our body uses to create dopamine in the brain. By increasing the levels of theanine and tyrosine, you can help raise those levels of dopamine. This is again that mind body connection. This is more brain body because there's that direct connection between neurotransmitter production and food. Theanine and tyrosine are in most things that you would already eat: lean meats, nuts, hard cheeses, number of vegetables. But really, what it comes down to is if you can eat a balanced diet, you are going to get all of these and get them in the amounts that you need. If and a varied, not just a balanced diet, but you want to make sure that it's varied. And this is what makes it a lot easier, because if you're there, it's like I have to eat these things to get these nutrients. No, eat varied proteins. And it doesn't have to be meats. If you're vegan, you can still get these things. If you're vegetarian, you can still get these things. So eat varied proteins, including tofu and soybeans. Various types of soy. I know that tofu is soy. But nuts, legumes. When we're talking about fruits and vegetables, if you, instead of focusing on individual fruits and vegetables, if you make sure that you are just eating the rainbow, get as many colors in as you can, you are going to be getting as many nutrients across the board as you can, which is going to give you that zinc, magnesium, and iron also, because there is iron in vegetables also. It's not just in red meat and seafood. It doesn't have to be complicated. Your recipes don't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. And you don't have to cook these things individually every day, and you shouldn't be. You don't need to make your life harder. The whole point of this is to simplify.
I love it. I mean, meal planning and batching are so oh my gosh, I wish I could say I was good at this, and, when I'm great on a diet when it's, like, just very, very strict, but as soon as I let any flexibility in, it's chaos, right? Like and I think it's because of the lack of planning, like, if it's just very
Mm.
structured, I just know, but as soon as there's, like, a gray area of, like, I'm hungry and I don't have something that's already pre-planned, oh, it is
One of my strategies for myself too. This is why I love batching, not just for the week, but this includes snacks. This includes like other kind of incidentals. I love I love having high protein, low carb uh, burritos in the freezer, and just have them in the freezer that you can. It's better than any microwave burrito that you're going to get at the store, when you can control all of the sodium, all of the seasoning, and everything else that's going in it, and you can measure the amount of ingredients that are going into it. It's fantastic. We we've had them we've been going through them in the freezer for the last 3 months. That was one batch, And now we're due to do another batch that'll last us another 3 months.
I'm honestly picturing my kiddos eating burritos for breakfast, which would be the best. I mean, because I swear breakfasts
Yeah.
are the worst, right? Like, it's so easy to get just tons of sugar, and the worst thing you can do in the morning is dump a bunch of sugar in your body, right? Um, but I mean, it doesn't even have to be a breakfast burrito, just a burrito with protein and all the healthy things. It would be such an easy way
Oh,
to start
absolutely.
out.
But it's great when you hit that point because I do it too. I'm guilty of it also. Even when you have food in the fridge, you're like, I don't want any of this. Well, when you have a freezer full of other things that you know that you do like and want, because you've already planned ahead for that, there you go. There's your comfort option, and you already know that it's something that you do want and that you do like, and that it does scratch the itch, and it's pre-portioned.
And yeah, it's just grab and go, right? Like, it takes the decision making out of it a little bit too. Um,
It takes the decision making out. It takes the anxiety out of it. It takes the overwhelm out of it.
any specific foods? I know we kinda talked about high protein, low carb, certainly that's what I found works best for me, for sure, but anything else, that you kind of that you recommend people either stay away from or make sure that they get in their diet?
It is always best to stay away from, high concentrated sugars. Not even because sugar is so horrible for you, but anything that hits that pleasure center in your brain, you're playing a dangerous game, unfortunately, especially with ADHD, because it's going to kick that dopamine, and then there's going to be that question of impulsivity, but also not only can you get the sugar crash, but you can get the dopamine crash, and then you're gonna get bigger cravings. That doesn't mean no sugar, but it does mean you have to really be careful about how much sugar you have, when, how often. That doesn't mean no carbs. I'm not saying like anyone has to be super strict. I'm saying be realistic here. But just heavily concentrated sugars are just dangerous with ADHD because that addictive tendency is just so much higher, and it's going to create that dopamine spike, and it's going to create a dopamine crash, which just creates a vicious cycle.
That it's interesting, I've heard all of those pieces separate, but I've never heard it all together, but the dopamine crash with the addictive piece of sugar, like, all of that playing the factor together makes so much sense, and I think it's hard for us to get that out, and to really make that switch, but my gosh, when I've done it, it feels so much better. My brain is so much clearer.
A big part of that is that to really hit that stride and hit that comfort point, to be in the pocket basically with ADHD. Part of it is about bringing up those dopamine levels, right? I mean, that's like we had kind of at the top of this. You brought up medications and how that can open things up a bit more, which it does. Absolutely, they do play an essential role. They're not the be all end all, but they do play an essential role because op- they do open up that space. But the really important piece here is normalizing those dopamine levels and getting out of that spike crash cycle, which is where those higher levels of distraction come in. That's where, I mean, there is such craziness that goes on within our bodies when you have that spike and crash of dopamine. You're having that anxiety and overwhelm kick in, which means that your norepinephrine and epinephrine is kicking in. So your fight or flight response is going crazy. If you're in a constant state of stress, then you've got cortisol levels being pumped up. It's kicking in with your liver. Your liver's being stressed. You've got higher levels of sugar pumping through your bloodstream when you don't need it because you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, but you're sitting at your desk at your job. You don't need that extra sugar release to run away from your computer. And I mean, you might want to, but that's not but you don't need it. Your computer is not going to attack you. And your body doesn't know that because our body only has one response to stress. And it doesn't matter where that stress comes from, good, bad, otherwise, whether it's because we're having fun, because we're scared, because we're angry, because we're in traffic, or because, we're having fun in the bedroom. It doesn't matter. Stress is stress, and our body only has one response. And if you don't do something positive to burn it off and switch back into that rest and digest mode, you're not in great shape. So it also keeps you in that state of feeling anxious and overwhelmed because all those chemicals in your body are flooded saying, no, we're stressed, which keeps you chasing all of it and keeps you in this cycle, which is not great. And it keeps you feeling foggy. You got to break it somewhere. It's mindset, it's habits, and it's diet.
What about exercise? Would
Oh,
that help
absolutely.
break the cycle too?
I mean, that's part of how you get in there with that fight or flight. That's how you burn that off. That's also how you know, bump up um, those other feel good chemicals in the brain. So, so that instead of it being a dopamine response, now you're actually bringing in other chemicals that give you that more long-term balanced feeling, especially when you're able to raise those serotonin levels, because basically dopamine is that quick hit. That's just that spike, and then it's gone, and that's why you keep chasing it. When you are able to bring up those serotonin levels, that's your sense, that's what gives you that sense of well-being. That's your stabilizing factor. And again, there are foods that do that. It's not new or different foods. It's the same diet that we were just talking about. It's nothing crazy. It's that well-balanced, healthy, lean proteins, nuts. Eat your fruits, eat your vegetables, eat varied proteins, eat your whole grains. It's everything that, you know, you should be doing from the food pyramid anyway. But it really does help balance all of that out. And that also lets you exercise better. And then that also it keeps that cycle going.
It lets you sleep better. You're less stress on your body. I mean, it's a great cycle once you can break the negative cycle. And I think you touched on it. I mean, nobody's perfect, right? Like we all kind of go in and out. Everyone that knows these things, it doesn't mean that we do it all
No,
the time. It just means that we know
it's all
what to
about
do.
messy progress, and ADHD is being inconsistent about what you have to do. So it's being consistently inconsistent. Moving moving forward is just about messy progress and just making sure that even when you fall off, you get back to it. That's what it's about. And I'm sure your clients know it, my clients know it. The way you get back to it is by staying accountable to someone. Because anyone who's like, well, I'll just stay accountable to myself. Bull. Yeah. If that was true, everyone would be fine. Everyone would have already done all of their own reading and cured themselves, and no one would have to have any conversations with anyone about anything.
Oh my gosh. Seth, you're a wealth of information. I feel like I could talk to you for 3 hours about this. Any final words as we wrap up? We kind of touched on the fact that you're a nurse, but anything from like a nursing side as it relates to ADHD that you wish people knew more about, or kind of any last words of wisdom for people struggling?
I do really want people to keep in mind that there is a lot of information about ADHD out there, and not all of it is true or helpful. There is a lot of misinformation out there. And at this point, a lot of people turn to social media for feelings of support, feelings of community for ADHD, which is fantastic that is such a resource that way. But just because someone is an influencer doesn't mean that they're providing helpful or true information. Trust but verify. Please don't just go off make thinking that just because it got said on someone's page that it is true. I really make a point to make sure that everything I bring is evidence-based, is backed by science and studies, and it is frustrating seeing so much opinion-based um, influence out there impacting so many people that can be so dangerous in a lot of ways. So please, find your community, find your support, but really make sure that when you are ready to move forward, that you are doing it with someone who can really hold you accountable, can truly help you achieve your goals, and isn't just helping you feel better about what you're already experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Awesome. Seth, where can people find you?
Find me on LinkedIn at Seth Rotman. I am on Facebook at Seth NCBC. And as of yesterday, when we were recording now, I am now on Blue Sky at the ADHD nurse coach.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, good. We will link all of those in the show notes for people to find you. Until next time, friends, embrace that unique brain you've been given. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. It is literally the best way you can support our work here. And if you're feeling extra generous, take a screenshot and tag us on social with one of your takeaways from the episode. Until next time, friends, embrace that unique brain you've been given.